Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Now, as you can see, today I'm filming from the couch because, well, I'm getting older, sitting on the floor with my knees aching. I don't like it that much. So here we are. And today we are talking about a very interesting DAC called EarMen Colibri. And as you can see, it's a portable DAC, but it is a little bit bigger than their previous portable one called Sparrow. And oddly enough, it uses the same Sabre DAC. But don't rush into conclusions, because this one is definitely different. It comes with price premium, and the price is same no matter if you're in a region that pays in US dollars or euros. It's 333. What differentiates it from the Sparrow is that it has a battery integrated inside of the unit. And power supply in general is more advanced, if I can say that. And the manufacturer claims that this battery will last you around 5 hours of playback. In my experience, that's quite fair because it's somewhere around 4.5 hours, at least in my experience. I suppose that depends on the headphones or earphones you're using and how loud you are listening to your music. You charge it over USB-C port as any other phone via phone charger, and you have another USB-C that is data port. That's one to connect this to your phone or your PC. And on the other side, we can find two analog outputs. One is 3.5 millimeters single-ended, while the other one is 4.4 millimeters balanced. And I think that one is the star of this show today, but I'll get to that a little bit later when we come to describing the sound. For now, I just wanted to mention that the whole unit is built really nicely, made out of something that really looks like a scratch-resistant glass, tempered glass, however you want to call it. For controlling this unit, we have 4 buttons, 2 on each side of it. And they're pretty nicely made, they have good feel to it, they have nice tactile response. 3 of them are fairly normal ones to turn it on and off, to adjust your volume, while the 4th one is actually the interesting one that will do a bass boost. Now, bass boost is fixed, you cannot control how much bass you add, but I'm glad to say that the amount of bass it adds to the sound is really subtle. And I like that because I don't like when the bass is drowning all other information from the recording. Personally, I didn't use it that much because Colibri here has pretty weighty and authoritative and meaty bass on its own without this bass boost. But I know that some of you really like this function, and to be perfectly honest, some headphones or earphones need it. Just for example, if you have something along the lines of Tin Hi-Fi, T3, P1 Plus, or even T2, this sort of bass boost can really counter that lean and thin presentation of those in-ears. I would usually use those with EQ anyways, so it's kinda nice to have that kind of functionality on the tip of your finger and you can just switch it on and off. As for the specs, as it says on the unit itself, it supports MQA, DSD, PCM, and basically any format that you can realistically encounter out there is supported. You'll have no trouble playing anything through this DAC. And the last thing that I wanted to mention about the specs is its power rating. Now this is interesting because on its single-ended output it has like modest 75 milliwatts at 32 ohms, which is quite okay. A lot of dongles and portable devices have similar kind of rating, but on the balanced output it's almost 4 times that, 280 milliwatts. And I would go as far to say that the reason to buy this 333 portable DAC should be its balanced output. And why is that? Well, let me tell you in the sound quality section. Now, I first tested its single-ended output, and the sound was really good and well balanced. It sounded natural and neutrally tuned. Bassline is quite weighty and authoritative, mid-range is rich with details, and high frequencies are quite extended. Now, everything sounded really nice and good. To confirm that, I quickly compared it to one that I recently reviewed, Khadas Tea. This is a really nice sounding, full sounding DAC, and these two sounded quite similar. I think that EarMen Colibri here had just a touch more high frequency extension and just a touch more detail retrieval in that upper register, including mid-range, especially higher mid-range and highs. Regarding everything else, like the sense of dynamics and soundstage width, depth, like spaciousness around you, how well they layer and how well they pinpoint instruments inside of that soundstage, these are quite comparable. But I did think that EarMen Colibri had just a little bit of advantage because it sounded touch more open and detailed, just a smidge. But it also does cost 133 more, and if you were to use its single-ended output only, I would say that the difference is probably not justified. And that T here is a better bang for buck because it offers like 95% or maybe even slightly more, 97, 7.5% of the sound fidelity of EarMen Colibri that is noticeably more expensive. But then I've decided to try its balanced connection. And wow, that was like taking the sound really to another level. Soundstage immediately expanded. Just everything started to stretch more to the left, more to the right, and every single tone just had more empty space, more air around it. So layering became better, and separation between each tone became better and filled with more air and more empty space. Also, because of this increased power on balanced output, it sounded a little bit more energetic and a little bit more dynamic, if I can say. It's not by much, because power is not a linear thing. It's actually in a logarithmic function when we observe it. And something that has almost 4 times the power doesn't sound 4 times as powerful and as dynamic. But this increased headroom definitely results in slightly punchier, slightly livelier and more dynamic sound. But again, the biggest difference is how soundstage expanded, air is much more observable, empty space around instruments, and just noticing details is easier that way. And great thing is that it doesn't come at a cost, because that natural balance, that full and weighty bassline, authoritative bassline, and also full and quite rich mid-range is preserved. It's just as if balloon expanded a little bit, and it's much easier to pick sounds around you and to notice details. But overall tonality does not change, it's still very full and natural sounding DAC. At that moment, it clearly outperformed Khadas Tea, which it realistically should for that price premium, and I quickly compared it to Cayin RU6, and I find Colibri wider sounding, with better separation, better layering, and more details. Now, if you're all about that R2R sound, which is really mild in some way and inoffensive and almost edgeless, it has details, it has brightness without ever sounding sharp and edgy, you might still prefer this, but technically speaking, it will sound muffled and congested and not as wide, not as open, and not as revealing as EarMen Colibri. So for me, that was quite an easy win for this one. And finally, I compared it to detail retrieval champion Aune BU2, and this one and this one are quite comparable in terms of fine details and in terms of just edges and quick transients and how they resolve every tiny detail from the recording and air. But Aune BU2 is somewhat analytical sounding DAC. It sounds thinner and not as weighty and not as lush in the mid-range, mid-bass and bass section as Colibri here does. So basically, this was the first portable DAC around this price that could match its resolution and its speed and the overall sense of liveliness of the sound, but it even improved on it with fuller, lusher sound signature, whereas all instruments and vocals sound more full-bodied and just nicer to listen to, especially for longer listening sessions. So, talking about sound fidelity, I thought it was quite okay in single-ended mode, but it didn't completely justify its price, whereas balanced output is on another level, and it's the best sounding portable DAC that I've ever heard in this price range. Now, few more things. It doesn't come with fancy magnetic thing like Khadas Tea does, but it does come with a nice leather case that you can put it into and just put it on your jeans, on your pocket, or anything like that. I quite like this. And it's really great that it comes included. You don't have to buy it separately, like with Cayin RU6, for example. So last thing that I wanted to mention is pairing, because I've tried it with several in-ears and several big headphones, and only thing that I can say is that single-ended output is powerful enough for basically any in-ear and earphone that I've personally tried, while it cannot fully drive bigger, more demanding cans. Whereas balanced output, because of its increased power and drive, handled almost anything that I threw at it really, really well. To recap everything I've just said during this video, this is an okay sounding DAC when it comes to its single-ended output. Well, it's actually more than okay, it's really good sounding one, but I wouldn't buy it solely for that purpose, because you can find less pricey DACs that are equally capable when it comes to single-ended performance. The star of the show is its balanced output, and it elevates its performance by a notch or two probably, and it matches everything that I've previously heard, and it even surpasses most of them in one way or the other. It combines the fullness and authority of the bass line and the fullness of the mid-range that I've got with something like Cayin RU6, with detail retrieval and quick transients and really clean and crisp edges of something like Aune BU2, all in one package, well mixed together, well balanced, in a really nice product that looks and feels premium and comes with a leather case as a default that you don't have to pay extra for. And when you utilize its great balanced connection, it starts to easily justify its price, and as I mentioned, it's basically a best portable DAC at this price range that I've heard so far. Also, if you need a multi-purpose DAC, something that you will carry around, but when you come home you would want to use as a main DAC in your room setup or something like that, desktop environment, it's also great for that. It holds its ground against bigger desktop products of a similar price. So something along the lines of topping E50, this can quite nicely match those. And it makes me really happy to say that EarMen continues to make really high quality products that sound great. From the first one that I reviewed here on this channel called TR-Amp, over Sparrow, and then absolutely great Tradutto, and the last one, again portable one, I can fully recommend if you are to use its balanced outputs. And that would be all for today. Thank you for watching, and to steal this from James May, like, comment, subscribe. Also become patron. That really helps. See you next time. Bye.